If you've ever taken a lunch to school before, you've likely heard of Capri-Sun. You've likely had one yourself. It's a juice beverage served in a pouch, so sort of like a juice box for kids who've outgrown juice boxes. Now, Capri-Sun's whole shtick is that it's supposedly a healthier alternative to soda, even though it still has a plethora of sugar found within it, just like, less. But of course, one of the most integral parts of making a consumer product targeted towards children is advertising. And as a product that's been around for more than 6 decades, naturally its advertising has to consistently transform and change itself with the times. For example, I found some fun advertisements like this one where some cool kids turn into water and phase through objects. And then there's this one where a sentient Capri-Sun pouch goes to an amusement park that only allows natural and healthy drinks inside. But what I wanted to focus on today was an advertising campaign that Capri-Sun engaged in from around the late 2000s to the early 2010s, and that of course is the Respect the Pouch campaign.
Respect the pouch! Respect it!
And more specifically, the DISRESPECTOIDS. The DISRESPECTOIDs are children who are transformed into hideous freaks after disrespecting the Capri-Sun pouch, which in this campaign is some sort of deity that needs to be idolized and revered lest you faced horrible consequences. I remember these commercials having a pretty strong impact on me. I was fascinated by these horrid transformations, a little scared with these kids facing irreversible transformation simply because they wanted to play around with a silly little juice pouch. So I thought it'd be fun to explore this frankly incredibly weird advertising campaign. We're going to explore all the DISRESPECTOIDS lore because let it be known that this extends far past these simple commercials. Now, let us explore the weird world of the DISRESPECTOIDs. This is like the first Capri-Sun pouch I've had in at least 10 years. Maybe more.
Respect the pouch! Respect it!
Before anything, I wanted to add some context to the general vibe of children's advertisements at this time. The mid to late 2000s to mid 2010s saw a sort of resurgence of children's food mascots. Some notable examples include the Goldfish Crackers, who went on adventures within a home that for some reason owned every single flavor of goldfish. And of course, there were the Apple Jacks characters, which were incredibly popular and kind of viral, and I think are still being used today, just without the Jamaican stereotype cinnamon. The Respect the Pouch campaign actually has some pretty humble origins. The first commercial was this one involving kids dressed up for, I don't know, a funeral or something. But they're drinking Capri-Sun, obviously, but one of them really wants to stomp on the pouch for some reason. I love the panic expression of his friend who desperately wants no stomping of the pouch. But of course, the kid stomps on the pouch anyway, and this commercial actually has various endings, all comically varying in severity. The most recognizable one, I think, is this one where the kid just blows up, leaving his clothes flying everywhere. Another one basically is the other end of the bodily harm spectrum, with the straw flying out of the pouch and into a car, setting off its alarm. The other two involves transformations of sorts, just not into DISRESPECTOIDs. One has the pouch stomper transform into a fire hydrant, while his friend, who is also transformed for some reason, is turned into a dog, who immediately tries to pee on his friend, who is now a hydrant. The other one involves the pouch stomper being transformed into the worst thing a boy can imagine, a princess. Oh, and his friend, who, may I remind you, is totally innocent, is turned into a grandfather clock. I don't know what's going on with this one. But with these commercials, we're officially in the Respect the Pouch era of Capri-Sun. But these commercials would soon become more complex, establishing actual characters and creating a sort of lore. So I thought we'd go down the line of DISRESPECTOIDs, go over what their mortal sin was, and what kind of transformation this resulted in.
Respect the pouch! Respect it!
I couldn't really find a true chronological order for these commercials, though there is a vague sense of older DISRESPECTOIDs versus newer ones, but each commercial follows the same general formula. Some kid is drinking Capri-Sun, disrespects it in some way, and is henceforth transformed into a DISRESPECTOID. And with that, let's go over our kooky cast of characters. First up is Bobblehead Fred, who I always saw as the mascot of the DISRESPECTOIDs. He's seen hitting all types of objects with a sort of oversized wiffle ball bat, while his friend drinks Capri-Sun and laughs. Of course, he then decides to throw and hit the pouch itself, resulting in him turning into a literal bobblehead. Next is another prominent DISRESPECTOID, Whoopi Kushner. She's a girl during her lunch period who was egged on by her friends to play a prank on a classmate by placing a pouch on his seat that he proceeds to sit on. This results in her transforming into this whoopee cushion monster, with her whole body being pink and her hands and feet being replaced by whoopee cushions, which of course make fart sounds all the time. But just looking at her horrified reaction, I feel like it really underscores how traumatic these transformations are. Plus, weren't her friends just as complicit in this too? So why weren't they transformed? We've also got Deltoid Donnie, who honestly has one of the tamer punishments in my opinion. He's engaging in an arm wrestling match and decides to push his opponent's arm onto a pouch, turning him into this muscly, out of proportion freak with chicken legs. But like, you could fix that at the gym. Donnie's also one of the Disrespectoids who had multiple endings to his commercial. You see, viewers could vote on which Disrespectoid Donnie would turn into. The alternatives were Upside Don, which literally just swapped the placements of his hands and feet, and then Donald Dumbbell, which is pretty horrifying, turning him into a turkey with a human head that's also holding dumbbells. I don't know what happened here. But following that, we have Leaky Louie, who literally just tries to poke a hole into the bottom of the pouch. But for doing so, he is punished with holes all throughout his body, which obviously leak water. And whatever he drinks, I guess. Next is Slow Mo, who after doing a cannonball on top of the pouch, is turned into a human-turtle hybrid. Of course, next is Pancake Peggy, who runs over a pouch with her RC car, flattening her. So kind of like Flat Stanley, just not as fun. Peggy, however, is another Disrespectoid with multiple endings, and these are honestly pretty terrifying. The first is Pylon Peggy, which is a traffic cone with Peggy's head attached to it. And then there's Pop Goes the Peggy, which just replaces her head with a steering wheel with her face printed on the airbag. Thank God these weren't official Disrespectoids. Now we move on to Sousaphone Simon, who drops the pouch into the horn, I think, of his bandmate. Listen, I haven't taken band since middle school, and even then my expertise doesn't really expand much past the clarinet and trumpet. But he basically turns into Patrick from the Band Geeks episode of SpongeBob. However, Simon is the final of our multiple choice Disrespectoids. The first alternative was Squeakbox Simon, which just takes the same concept but with an accordion instead. And then Cymbal Simon, which turns him into one of those toys, you know, the monkey that has the cymbals and it just claps together. That. But now we've reached the category of Disrespectoids I call I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Basically the most horrifying transformations. First is Chewy Stewie, who decides to give his pouch to his dog as a chew toy. This turns him into a chew toy himself, who is subsequently used by his dog as a chew toy. Honestly, this one's not only scary, but also mean. Why did they have to make his ears so big? Then there's Boing Boing Betty, who turns into a literal pogo stick after jumping on a pouch with hers. Even without this life-altering punishment, I wouldn't consider this a good idea anyways, but go off, I guess. She's basically inanimate in this form, just standing there, unmoving. And then we have Balloona Luna, who literally does nothing but trade her unopened pouch for some water balloons, and even then it was the kid next to her who initiated the trade. But whatever, she's turned into a literal balloon animal and then flies off into the cosmos. And then there's Sandy Mandy, who may actually have the scariest transformation of all. She buries her pouch into the sand and is then transformed into a sand sculpture. And then her arm falls off. When I was younger, I read this one book series called The Midnight Library, which is sort of like Goosebumps, except each book had 3 stories within it. Anyway, one of the books had a story where this artist used live humans as his sand sculptures, and they remained sentient the entire time. That's what this is giving. And then upon watching the commercial again, you literally do see her blink, making it even scarier. Thankfully, in the other related media, they're all sentient and seem to be doing pretty well, so good for them. But if you were to base it only on these commercials, I would be pretty concerned. We also do have a few Disrespectoids who never got a commercial but are featured on the website and web series. The most prominent of which is probably Chuck the Clucker, who I guess threw a pouch at a chicken or something. But it turned him into a half human, half chicken hybrid, and yes, he can lay eggs, we'll circle back to that. And then there's Handlebar Harry, who ran over a pouch with his bike, turning him into a human bike hybrid. And finally there's Bobby Sue, who are originally twin siblings Bobby and Sue. They stomped on the pouch at the same time and are now conjoined via their backs. So now that we have our cast of characters established, let's look a little more into their world, shall we?
Respect the pouch! Respect it!
Like any self-respecting ad campaign of this era, the Disrespectoids had their own website. In addition to playing games, which we'll get back to in a second, you also can watch webisodes. The Disrespectoids actually predated Monster High, which really kicked off the whole turning toys geared towards children into webisodes trend. And side note, Sandy Mandy absolutely would fit in with the Monster High crew. These webisodes are funny because there are only 10 of them and they're all like 2 minutes long, and then the series just ends. So basically we won't be spending a lot of time on these, but first off I need to point out the theme song for this show, which slaps.
A kid, a pouch, a really bad idea. A kid, a pouch. A kid, a pouch, a really bad idea. A kid, a pouch, a really bad idea.
Episode 1, Eggs a la Chuck, may actually be the weirdest and or most disturbing of these episodes, but this does establish the lore that the Disrespectoids all live together in a single house. This one is about Chuck preparing the gang breakfast, which involves him laying the eggs directly into the pan where the shell remains. We also see Louie serve juice by drinking a jug of, I assume, Capri-Sun and then just squirting it into their mouths. I guess that's easier than filling up individual glasses. Oh, except for Bobby, who's facing the chair. Sorry, Bobby. They all ask for a different type of egg, including Mandy, who asks for Eggs Benedict, and then Fred, who asks for fried eggs poached. Don't know what that means, considering those are two separate ways of preparing an egg, but anyways, they all just get scrambled eggs. Of course, this is all intercut with shots of Chuck pushing the eggs out. He tries making one for Betty, but then the egg he lays ends up hatching, meaning Chuck can also lay fertile eggs. But then all the other Disrespectoids want to kill and eat his new child. The end. I promise the others aren't as plot heavy as this one, like episode 2, Back-to-Back Madness. This one focuses on Bobby Sue, who honestly probably really do have the most horrifying transformation. Their personhood and individuality were quite literally taken from them. We see scenes of them swimming and making snow angels, and literally one of them won't be able to breathe. We also learn the important detail that Mo and Sue are apparently in a relationship, or at least Sue has a crush on Mo. But yeah, this episode only really exists to show how horrifying this transformation is. Episode 3 is called Shell, Sweet Shell, and it's interesting because we learn that apparently Mo has never gone into a shell before, because we, and he, learned that inside of Mo's shell is a luxury apartment that he can just freely roam around. So this punishment, quite literally, is not a punishment, but a luxury. A gift. Oh, and also in this one, we learn that Betty is an absolute weirdo.
Oh, I get it. The ball goes in the basket. Boing, boing, boing.
This storyline actually continued in episode 4, Shell House Rock. I was not expecting the Disrespectoid web series to be serialized, but I welcome it. This one is about Mo throwing a party inside of his shell for all the other Disrespectoids, who can all just fit inside, I guess. Importantly, this episode does confirm the Mo-Sue ship, but besides this, the rest of the party is pure chaos. Simon falls into the punch bowl, and after being discovered by Bobby, is flown into one of Louie's holes, which, what does that even look like from Simon's perspective? But anyway, he is then thrown onto Mandy, which causes her crab companion to fall onto Luna, popping her foot. Like, would this kill her? We also see Mo and Sue sharing a Capri-Sun in the hot tub, and I can only wonder why they would drink the thing that quite literally changed their lives, but then I remembered that this is all an advertisement. But then the party is shut down by the cops, who act so nonchalantly towards Mo, which implies that the Disrespectoids are just an accepted part of society. Episode 5, Doid to Doid Combat, involves the Disrespectoids playing a virtual reality fighting game, one that is so high-tech that it seemingly transports them into the game itself. This one literally had no plot, so let's move on. It was in episode 6, Luna's Dangerous Liaison, that I realized we had not seen Peggy yet in any of these episodes. Maybe they were saving her for a grand reveal at the finale, a la season 3 of Once Upon a Time when they revealed Elsa. But anyways, this one focused on Luna, who is an absolute queen and takes in a baby porcupine who lost their mother. Of course, this is an absolutely nightmarish combination because the porcupine literally pops both her hands. But then we get an answer to my question from episode 4 because it's revealed that she can just use an air pump to regenerate her missing limbs. We also learned that Luna has Elastigirl-esque shape-shifting powers, but after being popped 2 more times, she kicks the porcupine out, forcing them onto the streets once more, sad and alone. Episode 7 is Mr. Peeps Has Got to Go, and it gives us an insight into the nightmare that is Sandy Mandy's existence. Basically, this episode centers on Mandy trying not to get peed on by a cat who sees her as a litter box. What makes this especially cruel is that this whole episode takes place on a beach. so there's sand everywhere. But anyway, we mercifully end this episode without anyone getting peed on. We also learn that Mandy also has shape-shifting powers, apparently, turning into a sandcastle. Episode 8 is fun because it's an origin story. Called When Harry Met Stewie, it centers around the story of how Harry became a Disrespectoid. Harry is a wannabe daredevil who becomes transfixed on the Disrespectoids after seeing Betty save the cat from the prior episode out of a tree. And once again, she's seen being a total weirdo.
Don't worry, I'll save you! Boy! Come on, Mr. Peach! Time to get saved!
Then we see Harry meet Stewie, who apparently can use his ears to fly a la Dumbo. But also like Dumbo, however, he apparently cannot talk. Simply squeak. But he also can communicate via thought bubble, I guess. But then we see Harry run over the pouch with his bike, turning him into Handlebar Harry. Episode 9, Just Add Louie, focuses on Louie using his water powers, not for mischief, but for good deeds. That's it. And finally, we have episode 10, our finale, She Who Smelt It. This one, as I'm sure you can guess, centers on Whoopi Kushner, who you cannot convince me isn't just someone's thinly veiled fetish. This is literally just her giving an impassioned monologue about her fart sounds, and then she beatboxes.
I am more than just the sum of Rudy Poots.
This episode's also weird because it implies that her fart sounds are actual just farts because they also smell. Anyway, that's the series. I don't know why I expected an actual grandiose finale because these are literally nothing more than bite-sized videos aimed at children for the purpose of advertising a juice product. And they obviously made all 10 episodes before rolling them out, and then once the campaign just ended, they didn't bother to make any more. But it was fun to get a glimpse inside of the world of the Disrespectoids, even if half the time it made me fairly uncomfortable. It was pretty neat just to see them as normal kids, just living life. Though I do have questions about their living arrangements. They clearly all live together, so who's paying the bills here? My theory is that Harry's father is super rich because, I mean, look at Harry. And because he's so ashamed of his son's new appearance, he just shuffles him off into his own house where he'll live out the rest of his days. And because none of the other parents could handle their new transformations either, they all readily agreed to have them all live together. Anyway, that's it for the webisodes, but not for the website.
Respect the pouch! Respect it!
I cannot wait for you to find out the meaning of that title. Anyways, the Disrespectoids of course had their own website, much like any food product aimed at children around this time. The website was kind of cool in that it allowed you to kind of explore the world of the Disrespectoids and sort of learn about each of the characters and more information on how they came to be. But of course, the website also had games. For the most part, each Disrespectoid got a game tailored to them. And let me tell you, I went on a journey while playing these games. And it all started with actually trying to play them. As I'm sure you could assume, these games were all based off of Adobe Flash. The internet is already a pretty dire place for preservation, and this was made even worse with the death of Flash in late 2020. The whole death of Adobe Flash was sort of its own debacle that has already been well documented, but just know that it actually disproportionately affected kids' online media from the 2000s. Of course, anytime this happens, people immediately get to work and try to get some sort of preservation effort up and running. So thank you, Flashpoint. Unfortunately, not all the games were up there, but I was able to find evidence of the ones I couldn't play. First off is Throatio, and I just want to say these games are all pretty ugly. This one is funny yet horrifying because it's about kids trying to climb up Betty and use her as a toy against her will, and so you need to aim and throw these kids at pre-marked destinations. But this game was kind of horrible to play. It's basically impossible to aim, and they do give you markers to help aim, but it barely helps. You also get limited chances, so I rage quit this one pretty early. Next up is Crash Course, Fred's game. The setup of this game is fun because it just shows how obnoxious Fred's comically large head is because it literally causes him to aggravate a swarm of bees, forcing him to run for his life. This one's just a basic obstacle course game where you can either jump, duck, or charge to make your way to the end. Despite this simplicity, my tired, withered eyes made this basically impossible to play on the small window I was playing on. Donnie Dare's arm wrestling naturally is Donnie's game, but the setup of this one is incredibly unfair because it's him engaging in arm wrestling. But like, his whole thing is that he's basically all upper body, but whatever. You just need to repeatedly tap on buttons on the keyboard to have your power gauge surpass your opponents so you can win each match. Again, very basic, but the first time I played it, it froze on me, so I lost a round. Odd Jobbin' is Louie's game, and much like the webisode, it involves him using his powers to do odd jobs around town. These jobs involve cleaning cars, watering flowers, and putting out fires. Depending on the scale and severity of the task, they give out different points, and you have a time limit just to get as high of a score as possible, but outside this, there's really no stakes. Whoopi Kushner's game is Stink the Landing, and it confirms that her fart sounds also smell, which is not something Whoopi Cushions are known to do, but because of her stink, she is kicked off the cheerleading squad. This game was weird and I really had no idea how to play it. I guess you have to keep pushing the spacebar to build up momentum before you jump, and you want to jump as far as possible. Oh, and this of course all happens as fart sounds play. I guess after each round you can add items to help you gain distance, but my game wouldn't load after the first round. Balluna Luna's Splash Bash obviously stars our queen Luna. Basically, Luna is being viciously harassed by local bullies who are trying to assault her with water balloons, and so she decides to fight them off using her water balloon cannon. And when you hit the kids, they make this honestly horrifying screaming sound. I tried to intentionally lose and see what happened, and it presented me with a link to play the full game, but I obviously couldn't actually click on this, so I have no idea what it meant. Chewy Stewie's Tomato Toss is the exact same game. Literally, just a cosmetic swap of the game we just talked about, focusing on tomatoes instead of water balloons. I know the bar for children's media is pretty low, but come on, you only have like 10 characters. You couldn't come up with something a little more imaginative? The next game I played was Sandy Mandy's Breach Brawl, and you wouldn't believe it, but it was the same game. Before I talk about the next game, Slow Mo's Shell Shock, I want to give some context. So Flashpoint gives you a nice screenshot preview when you click on a game, and viewer, let me tell you, when I saw the preview of the game, I actually screamed, because it was once again the same exact game. I of course played it to see if there are any differences, but there were none. It's like that one episode of RuPaul's Drag Race where they did the Madonna runway, and then 4 queens ended up wearing a kimono in a row. Very disappointing. Thankfully, we finally get to eat some good food with Peggy's Peel Out. This game is firstly not a clone of the previous 4, but actually one of the more ambitious games of the lot. You can not only race on pre-made tracks, but you can also make your own tracks to race on. You actually don't steer anything, you just hold down the spacebar to accelerate, and you just want to try to slow down when you turn so you don't spin out. So kind of a nightmare to control, but I was so excited for something different that I honestly didn't care. And to my delight, there was actually a music making game. It wasn't explicit, but I think this one was implied to be Simon's game, which makes sense. Anyways, this game was kind of dreadful. It's just you throwing different sounds together to make a song. And yes, this includes fart noises. Like I mentioned, there were some games I ended up never being able to play because I didn't want to search too deep and risk a virus, but I was able to find some evidence of them online. Hard Boiled is Chuck's game, and it looks like a sort of variation on the other cannon blasting games, except this time you get a full 360-degree range of motion. And then there is Harry's game, the delightfully titled Holy Spokes. This one looks similar to Peggy's game, except it doesn't seem like you could build your own track and you're actually racing others in it. Unfortunately, I could confirm that Bobby Sue did not have a game, making them the only Disrespectoid to not have a commercial or a game, which is fair because I can't really imagine what a Bobby Sue game would look like. Or can I? I actually thought it'd be fun to brainstorm some Bobby Sue games, so I actually wrote some down in here. My ideas were a rhythm game where either Bobby or Sue did a move and you'd have to follow them, an obstacle course game where you would have to switch between the two to access different abilities, a cannon game where you have to hit misbehaving kids with some sort of projectile and they make a sort of horrifying sound when hit, and a dress-up game where you can dress them up to go on a date with Mo. I also found this generic game that I presume came from the first year of the Respect the Pouch campaign before they introduced the Disrespectoids. It's called Line of Respect and makes you protect the pouch from kids who want to throw bricks and shoes at it by drawing lines with your mouse. This game was terrible. I only lasted about 30 seconds playing it. But that's it for the website. Or is it?
Respect the pouch! Respect it!
To my surprise and delight, the Disrespectoid storyline had an actual honest-to-God finale. The Legend of the Golden Pouch game was released on the website and serves as a conclusion to these character stories. The game begins when Chuck just randomly walks in holding a map leading to the Golden Pouch, which is said to make anyone's dream come true. Unfortunately, Louie, being leaky and all, accidentally ruins most of the map, and the Disrespectoids then begin to fight over the true path to the pouch. So they divide into 2 teams, one led by Fred and one led by Peggy, essentially creating a sort of new school versus old school dynamic. However, Bobby Sue is notably not a part of this game, so I don't know what the people behind these games have against them. and then you get to pick what team you want to be a part of. This game both delightfully and miserably involves webcam-based activities. Here's me trying to play it at 12 a.m. in my bed. Clearly that didn't work, so I had to play it at a later date at my desk. And here's that. This game is somehow both horribly simple and needlessly complicated. Like, you need to essentially move your hand in a specific corner of the screen. The only one that really gave me any trouble was this canoeing one. You had to move your hand either on the right or left side of the camera, but the only indicator is the side that Luna is rowing on the other side of the screen. So you also had to pay attention to that. And sometimes I swear to God, these sides change after like 1 second. Then there was this horrible one at the end that required you to avoid flying Capri-Sun pouches being thrown by a monkey. I wasn't sure whether you needed to wave or just have your hand out, but anyways, I won. And after your team wins, they use the golden pouch to become human again, free of the Disrespectoid curse once and for all. Of course, since this is a game for literal children, the winning team takes pity on the losing team and gives them the pouch as well. Except Bobby Sue, who, like I mentioned, is not in this game. Maybe Mo likes them better as a Disrespectoid. But now with the characters cured, there simply was no way to continue the campaign, and the Respect the Pouch branding began to end. The end of an era.
Respect the pouch! Respect it!
The Disrespectoids feel like kind of a fever dream at this point. I think the thing that makes it better for me is that this is all, at the end of the day, an advertisement for Capri-Sun. Like, I don't know who had the idea to make the pouch of Capri-Sun this treasured object, but I love them for it. If you watch any of my prior stuff, you know that I love a wacky ensemble of characters, and this clearly has that in spades. I think the creativity present here is off the charts. And there is a bit of an edge here that I don't think we really find in children's advertising, either back then and definitely not today. Like, the closest thing that I can compare this to of its time were the Goldfish Cracker advertising campaign, and while I like the Goldfish characters enough, there's really not much bite to it. But with the Disrespectoids, it's almost kind of disturbing. Like, these are children's advertisements that centered around body horror, and as someone who is a big horror fan, I think it's such a fascinating hook for a children's marketing campaign. I also think this is something we'll never get today. For starters, the slow death of cable means that advertising campaigns aren't really focused on television commercials anymore. Also, children's websites don't really exist either. The era of the Disrespectoids was way before social media became literally the only way to experience the internet. Internet games don't really exist anymore, and while webisodes do exist to some degree, mostly relating to doll lines, those all exist either on YouTube or a streaming service like Netflix. But I also feel like this wasn't really a sustainable campaign, and I'm actually impressed that they managed to make the call to give it a proper ending. Most of these campaigns just kind of fizzle out after a few years of activity, but I don't think a campaign involving a bunch of weirdos just doing things has that much longevity, outside of continually adding more Disrespectoids, which I guess is possible, but probably only to an extent. So all this to say, I find the Disrespectoids to not only be a fascinating marketing campaign, but also a really interesting look into a specific period of time. But that's all for this one, and until next time, I'm going to workshop a TV pilot where the Kool-Aid Man has a group of kids wearing color coordinating outfits, each correlating to a specific flavor of Kool-Aid. I wouldn't call this particularly good. I can't believe I bought 10 of these. Just so you know, I bought the wild cherry flavor of the Roaring Waters Capri-Sun line. That's what I remember really liking as a kid. There's no way you could have told me this would have been water. Like, if I didn't know this was water, I wouldn't have guessed that. This, like, literally tastes like juice. Yeah, this straw is, like, not long enough for this whole pouch. Like, I have to have it, like, deep within there to drink it.